getting back on topic with the whole UFO angle that's being pushed on the world stage, going back to 1947 in Roswell, and the actual site on the third parallel where this supposed event took place. We'll get more into Roswell, but first off, just more Masonic connections with the number 33 and signs and symbols. And here you have the Phoenix Lights, which is basically a chevron in plain sight, chevron being 33. And also it's shaped, as you see here, as the Masonic square. And you combine the two, of course, the compass and the square itself. So they have their Masonic fingerprints all over the place. And of course, the Phoenix itself in Freemasonry, and also being, of course, on the third parallel, just like Roswell. Just like you see here with Area 51 and Robert Lazar in the Illuminati card game from 1995, doing the Masonic hand sign. And that again gets back the whole so-called Roswell incident with a video clip I'll play from the 1980s, this one TV show called Unsolved Mysteries. Now let's take a look at this portion from Unsolved Mysteries regarding the Roswell incident.
He found the debris field spread out near his ranch house.
It was obvious that something had crashed in one of his pastures the night before. Whatever it was broken up beyond identification.
The debris field was approximately 3/4 of a mile long, maybe as much as 200 or 300 feet in width. Scattered along there were bits and pieces of material. We refuse to call it metal because from the descriptions we have, it was more of a plastic-like material, very strong, very lightweight. The pieces of it were described as being 3 or 4 feet long, but as light as a feather, as thin as newsprint. There were metal beams that were slightly flexible but very strong, and it was spread out all over the field.
This is Aerogel, the world's lightest, that is least dense solid. This piece has a mass of just 1.22 grams. That is only a few times the mass of the same volume of air, which kind of makes sense because it is 99.8% air. In fact, some aerogels are so light that if you removed all the air from them, they would be less dense than air.
Some of the metal pieces appear to have strange qualities and unusual tensile properties. Later that day, Mac drove over to his closest neighbors, Floyd and Loretta Proctor, who lived 10 miles away.
Afternoon, Floyd. Loretta.
Hi, Mac. What brings you all the way out here? For Mac, he was excited. You know, he was wanting somebody to go down and check it out. And we should have, and we didn't.
Take a look at that. Light a match to it, you'll see what I'm talking about.
And he brought a little sliver of wood-looking stuff, and him and my husband tried to cut it and burn it, but it wouldn't whittle and it wouldn't burn.
I have long been fascinated by aerogel, so I actually flew out to Aerogel Technologies in Boston to find out, why was aerogel invented? How is it made? Why is it such a good thermal insulator? And what is it used for? Okay, we are going to try an experiment to demonstrate the insulating power of aerogel. So over here we have two setups, one with a glass petri dish and the other one with aerogel on top. Both are made of silica, but with very different physical structures. We're gonna see how long it takes to melt these chocolate bunnies with a Bunsen burner. Now to have a look at this experiment, we have a FLIR T1020, which can see temperatures up to 2,000 degrees Celsius.
It's getting pretty hot.
Yeah, you can see that the glass is getting really hot already. And after just a minute?
It's starting to smoke.
Oh, okay.
It's definitely melting and smoking. Oh yeah, here we go. I would say that that's a phase change.
We've got a liquid chocolate situation. We have some smoking bunny. Over here, the bunny is actually sort of melting over, and look, it's sort of tilting to the side.
All right, I think we're gonna call that a melt.
What is that?
Oh, on cue, on cue. I would say that that's a material fail.
Not only did the bunny melt quickly, the petri dish cracked under the thermal expansion.
Want to pop it in?
So now let's try the aerogel.
Okay. All right.
So how was aerogel invented?
Back in 1931, a guy named Professor Samuel Kistler had a bet with his colleague, Charles Learned.
Now the bet revolved around jellies, like peanut butter and jelly jellies. Now the thing about jellies is they are actually a combination of liquids and solids. I mean, they're mostly liquid, but it's embedded within this 3D solid structure.
So if you think of a gel like Jell-O, has this skeleton with nano-sized pores that gives it its rigidity, and then that's about 1% of the gel.
So the bet was this: could you remove the liquid from the jelly without affecting the solid structure? I mean, if you just evaporate the liquid out, well, then the solid structure shrinks, because as you remove liquid molecules, they pull on each other and they pull on the solid structure around them, basically crumpling it from the inside. Now, Samuel Kistler solved this problem in two ways. First, he realized you could replace one liquid with another inside the jelly just by washing it thoroughly. So you could swap out, say, water for alcohol. And then, if you take the jelly and put it in a high pressure vessel called an autoclave,
By heating it to the high temperature and high pressure point called the critical point of the liquid, that liquid transformed into a semi-liquid semi-gas called a supercritical fluid.
at this point, there is no longer a distinction between liquid and gas. Those molecules are no longer pulling on each other.
And so once you've depressurized the vessel, that solid skeleton, that 1% of the mass of the gel, is left behind intact, except for where there was liquid in the pores before is now gas. And that solid skeleton, that nanoporous solid, is what we call aerogel.
Kistler published his findings in Nature in 1931.
Well, I'll admit that's pretty damn odd.
Now I would say it looked like plastic, but back then, why, we didn't have plastic, and I guess it was more like some kind of a lightweight wood.
The Proctors urged Brazel to go to the authorities. The following Monday, Brazel reported his discovery to the sheriff, who informed nearby Roswell Army Air Base. That afternoon, Mac Brazel led 2 Army intelligence officers to the crash site. One of the officers was Major Jesse Marcel Sr., an experienced combat pilot whose primary duty in peacetime was to investigate air accidents.
Why don't you stay there, Mr. Brazel? Lieutenant?
Even with his experience, Marcel was unable to identify what kind of craft it was. Marcel died in 1982, but before his death, he gave the following interview for a documentary film about UFOs.
They were just fragments strewn all over the area, an area about 3/4 of a mile long and several hundred feet wide. So we proceeded to pick up the parts. He says, I tried to bend the stuff. He says, it will not bend. I even tried to burn that. It would not burn. He says, that stuff weighs nothing. It's not any thicker than tinfoil in the pack of cigarettes. He says, we even tried making a dent in it with a 16-pound sledgehammer.
This scientist is creating a new and highly specialized type of aerogel using a wonder material we know and love, graphene. While this material is mostly comprised of air, it also boasts graphene-like properties that make it both super strong and electrically conductive. This means that the aerogel you're looking at could completely revolutionize material sciences, even blazing a trail for in-space manufacturing, which is why scientists are now looking to synthesize this new material on the International Space Station. because in the absence of gravity, strange things can happen.
One thing I was certain of, being familiar with all our activities, that it was not a weather balloon, nor an aircraft, nor a missile. It was something else of which we didn't know what it was.
Late on the night of July 7th, Major Marcel drove back to Roswell, his car loaded down with the unusual remains found on the ranch. Before going on to the base, he stopped by his home. He wanted to show his family what he had found.
When he came back to the house, he had a bunch of wreckage with him at the time, and he brought the wreckage into the house, actually awakened my mother and myself out so we could view this because it's so unusual. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning, as I recall, right? And he spread it out so we could get some basic idea of what it looked like, what it was.
Jesse Marcel Jr. was 11 years old at the time and remembers the incident vividly.
Where'd you find all this stuff?
He is one of the few people still alive known to have handled pieces of the debris.
No, son, I don't know what this stuff is.
We were amazed by this debris that was there. Probably because we didn't know what it was, just the unknown.
Look at this writing. What do you think that is?
The most remarkable fragment was a short piece of I-beam, which was covered with strange symbols and embossed markings.
Looks like some kind of hieroglyphics.
And that gets into what you see here with the more recent, going back to last year with Elon Musk. And when it comes to the Egyptian pyramids, where Elon Musk stated on Twitter that aliens built the pyramids. And this is definitely a subconscious seed being planted, that we're being visited. The Roswell incident where you had the hieroglyphics supposedly on the parts. The Egyptian pyramids, of course, the hieroglyphics. And basically started from so-called ancient aliens. So definitely they're planting a seed of mind once again with these visitors from so-called other worlds, going way back in time. And this is part of removing God from the equation. And another very interesting aspect when it comes to Elon Musk and the connection with von Braun in this 1952 book by Wernher von Braun himself called Project Mars, where he saw that a man would lead this colony to Mars, and it was a man called Elon. So what are the chances of that? Unbelievable. And of course, in 1952, NASA, the so-called space agency for the U.S., did not exist. Basically, NASA started in 1958, and with all the so-called missions to Mars, as you see here, being led by SpaceX and Project Mars, it's definitely obvious this is all planned years ago, many years ago, as we can see, with, again, Wernher von Braun planting the seed with Project Mars, led by a man by the name of Elon on the world stage. So definitely, the world is a stage, and these events are made to happen, just like I showed in the very beginning of this video presentation, with Carol Rosen telling us through Wernher von Braun what's going to happen before it happens, and it's obvious to see that the world's a stage.
Was against what he called aliens, extraterrestrials. That would be the final card. And over and over and over, during the 4 years that I knew him and was giving his speeches for him, he would bring up that last card. And remember, Carol, the last card is the alien card. We're going to have to build space-based weapons against aliens, and all of it, he said, is a lie.